Welcome to the Pocket MBA, your guide to the core strategic thinking driving business today.
We're diving into a challenge that honestly keeps a lot of leaders up at night.
Absolutely. It's this constant push and pull, isn't it?
Yeah.
On one hand, you need prudence, caution, compliance, controls, preventing risk.
Right, the don't mess up side of things.
Exactly. But on the other hand, real growth, getting ahead strategically, that demands taking risks. Calculated risks, yes, but risks nonetheless.
And finding that balance? Well, that's the tightrope walk.
So if you're facing a big decision, maybe trying to figure out your company's next move, getting this balance right is crucial. That's really our mission today.
It is. We want to equip you with a toolkit. We'll look at assessing strategic risks properly, structuring your operations for what we might call radical uncertainty.
Radical uncertainty. Sounds intense.
It can be. And maybe most critically, we need to tackle those financial models, DCF, IRR, that often unintentionally kill off the really promising long-term high-reward ideas.
Before they even get a fair hearing.
Precisely.
And the starting point, really, is this deep-seated issue in so many companies, this retrospective trap. That's what the source material calls it.
Fighting the last war.
That's the phrase the military historians use, isn't it? We build defenses against the last threat, the one we just dealt with.
It makes sense on a human level. You see a failure, you plug that specific hole. Think back to the early 2000s. Enron, WorldCom, huge scandals.
Right. And the response was?
Sarbanes-Oxley in the U.S., 2002. Massive new rules focused squarely on financial reporting controls.
A direct reaction. And then 2008, the global financial crisis.
Same pattern. Banks scrambled. They changed business models, backed away from those complex financial products.
Overhauled the math, the models that failed them.
Exactly. And look, those actions were necessary defensively. They were designed to stop that specific crisis from happening again.
What? There's always a but.
But while they were busy reinforcing against the last enemy, pouring resources into that,
They might have missed the next threat brewing somewhere else, maybe in tech or geopolitics, something totally different.
that's the danger. You achieve a kind of short-term safety, but maybe at the cost of being ready for what's truly new and unexpected.
And this defensiveness, it has a real cost.
Yeah.
The material talks about organizational drag.
Yeah, it's like friction inside the system, all that focus on just preventing things, on compliance. It makes actually deciding things incredibly slow, bureaucratic.
Okay, slow decisions are bad. We get that. But how bad? Can we quantify this drag?
Well, here's the jaw dropper. A survey asked strategy officers about this. They estimated that if you could significantly cut down this drag, this time spent on compliance hoops instead of making calls,
Yes.
the rate of revenue growth for their companies might actually double.
Hang on. Double. That's not marginal. That's transformational.
It's staggering. It suggests that the way many companies are set up is acting like a massive brake on their own growth engine.
So if the payoff is potentially that huge, why isn't everyone fixing it? What are they actually spending all this risk management time and energy on now?
Well, the data paints a pretty clear picture. Risk managers, auditors, they're spending over half their time, more than 50%, on what are ultimately low-impact compliance risks.
Like what specifically?
Think financial reporting controls, basic legal stuff, ticking boxes on HR policies. Necessary, yes, you have to do them, but
But they don't really move the needle on the big picture. They don't prevent the major disasters.
rarely. Because the source material is very clear on this. The vast majority of really big losses, the kind that hammer market cap, they come from mismanaged strategic risks.
So the big bets. Market entry failures, getting blindsided by tech shifts, a competitor making a game-changing
It's
move.
exactly those things. So the focus is completely upside down. You've got over half the effort going into preventing risks that might account for, what, maybe 5% of the actual financial damage.
We're meticulously polishing the teaspoons while a tidal wave looms offshore.
That's a pretty good way to put it. The effort is fundamentally misaligned with where the real danger and opportunity lies.
Okay, so this structural misalignment, this inversion, if risk management has become the internal police, how do we fundamentally change its role? Make it a partner in creating value, not just stopping bad things.
It has to start with a mindset shift, really. For so long, risk management just meant risk prevention, stop losses, full stop.
But that's not the whole picture.
Not at all. The modern goal has to be about value creation, not just value protection. Anyone who manages an investment portfolio understands this instinctively, right?
Lower risk usually means lower returns.
Yeah.
That's the fundamental trade-off.
Exactly. So the risk department's job changes. It's not just saying no, it's helping the whole company figure out and clearly state its actual appetite for risk. How much are we willing to dare? For what potential reward?
So they become less like gatekeepers and more like strategic advisors, helping managers understand the upside, maybe push back against that institutional inertia, that play-it-safe culture.
Precisely. They need to actively help line managers, who are often caught in that overly cautious mindset, to see when taking a calculated risk is actually the right strategic move. They help frame the potential return needed to justify the exposure.
Okay, so how does this look in practice? Are there examples of companies doing this well?
Yes, best practices are definitely emerging. There's a great example of a large company that made a really bold move. They decided to terminate a client relationship they'd had for 35 years.
35 years, that sounds counterintuitive. Why walk away from a long-term stable client?
Because when they looked closely, the client was categorized as not very risky, which sounds good, but
And the profits were tiny.
exactly, negligible profits. The capital and resources tied up servicing this safe client were delivering really poor returns, so the firm made a strategic trade.
They gave up stable, low-return business.
To free up that capital for potentially higher return, possibly riskier opportunities elsewhere, they used risk analysis not to protect the status quo, but to actively optimize their portfolio for growth.
That's a fundamental shift.
Mm.
It moves risk from being a compliance function to a strategic one, which ties into the next best practice you mentioned, focusing on decisions, not just process.
Right. We have to get away from the compliance busy work, the endless forms, the annual quizzes on IT security that everyone clicks through.
We've all done them.
Yeah,
Do they actually stop major strategic blunders?
probably not. The key is integrating risk thinking directly into the decision-making process itself. Lego is a fantastic example here.
Lego, the toy company, how do they manage risk?
They embed it right at the top, where big money decisions are made. Their senior director of strategic risk management is part of every decision involving capital spending above a certain amount.
Okay, but is that person just there to tick a box to say, yep, risk reviewed, or is it more substantive?
Oh, it's absolutely substantive. Their role isn't just compliance sign-off, it's advisory. They help the managers proposing the project spot potential pitfalls early.
Yeah.
And crucial, they ensure the new project fits into Lego's overall portfolio of risky projects. They're asking, does this balance our other bets? Do we have too much exposure here already? Is this the right kind of risk for us right now?
So it's forward-looking. It's about selecting the right risks, the ones aligned with the company's strategic goals and risk appetite, not just auditing past mistakes.
Exactly. It makes the risk function an architect of future strategy, not just a historian of past failures.
Which naturally leads to the third best practice, making employees the first line of defense, distributing that risk awareness and decision-making out into the business units.
This is where enterprise risk management, or ERM, comes in as the framework. But it has to be centered where the real knowledge is in the business units. IBM's approach since around 2006 is a great model.
380,000 employees.
Yeah.
Making them all risk-aware without it just being another corporate mandate sounds challenging.
It is, and they realized simple awareness training wasn't enough. They invested heavily in making it practical and engaging. Lots of online courses, sure, but the real innovation was in gamification and simulations.
Simulations. How did those work?
Business leaders would have to develop complex proposals, say for a customer bid. The simulation would throw realistic curveballs at them, forcing them to make trade-offs, speed versus cost, innovation versus certainty.
So they were practicing dealing with risk in a messy, realistic way, not just learning rules.
Exactly. Building that muscle memory for making tough calls under pressure. It's about practice, not just passive awareness.
That distinction feels critical.
It is. And leading companies are now embedding this even deeper. They're using risk screens in hiring, trying to gauge a candidate's aptitude for handling ambiguity. They're targeting the intensive training, the simulations, the scenarios on jobs that face the most high-stakes decisions.
And the final piece is the structure itself, reinforcing the message.
Absolutely. The reporting line speaks volumes. We're seeing a clear trend moving the chief risk officer or equivalent to report directly to the strategy chief or the COO.
Not under the general counsel or compliance officer.
Right. Taking it out of that purely legal compliance box, that single change transforms the function. It shifts the core question from, are we compliant, to are we taking the right risks smartly?
It fundamentally changes the conversation.
It does. And it brings us back, interestingly, to the origin of the word risk.
You mentioned its roots,
Yes, it shares roots with the Italian word risicciare,
which means
to dare. Leading firms are daring to re-engineer themselves, not to avoid risk, but to manage it intelligently as a source of competitive advantage, daring to make calculated bets. Okay, so we've talked about structuring the organization to embrace risk. Now, how do you actually formulate strategy when the future is, well, murky?
right, because the biggest trap is thinking it's one extreme or the other. Either the future is perfectly predictable,
Which it never is.
or it's completely unknowable chaos, which leads to paralysis. Assuming certainty is dangerous, it leads to things like basing your entire strategy on a single-point DCF forecast.
That's the trap that forces managers to kind of sweep uncertainty under the rug. They underestimate threats. They overestimate returns. We saw it with Kenneth Olson at Digital Equipment Corporation back in '77.
Oh, the famous quote.
The infamous quote, "There is no reason for any individual to have a computer in their home." His strategy was built on that single, clear view of the future where mainframes ruled, and that certainty cost the company everything.
So we need a more nuanced way to think about uncertainty, which brings us to this framework, the 4 levels of residual uncertainty.
Exactly. And residual is key. This is the uncertainty that's left over after you've done all the analysis you possibly can.
Got it. So level 1.
Level 1, a clear enough future. This is basically the world where traditional strategy tools work well. There might be some uncertainty, but it doesn't really affect the strategic decision you need to make.
So you can build a reliable forecast.
Pretty much. A single forecast is precise enough. Think about a major airline figuring out how to respond to a new low-cost carrier entering its market.
Okay, yeah. You can figure out market size, competitor costs, capacity. It's knowable, mostly.
Right. You do your homework, you can build a solid business case. Standard analysis, like DCF, works fine here.
All right, level 2.
Level 2, alternate futures. Here, the future isn't a single point, but it's likely to be one of a few distinct, discrete scenarios. You might even be able to assign probabilities to them.
But the key is your best strategy changes drastically depending on which scenario actually happens.
Exactly. This is common in industries facing major regulatory changes or in commodity markets with big capacity decisions, like U.S. long-distance phone companies back in 1995, waiting to see how deregulation would shake out.
Or deciding whether to build a huge new chemical plant when you don't know if your main competitor will build one too.
Precisely. Your strategy build or don't build depends entirely on that competitor's move. The tool here isn't just DCF, it's decision analysis, where you explicitly map out the strategies, scenarios, and payoffs.
Okay, makes sense. On to level 3.
Level 3, a range of futures. Here, the future isn't a few discrete points, it's a continuum. You can define the range, maybe bounded by key variables, but the exact outcome could fall anywhere within that range. There are no natural scenarios.
This sounds like market entry into somewhere complex and new.
That's a classic example. A European company entering India, say. Their best analysis might show market penetration could be anywhere from 10% to 30% in 5 years. There's no single event that triggers 10% versus 30%.
And a strategy optimized for 30% penetration looks very different, much bigger investment than one for 10%.
Totally different. So since you can't rely on discrete scenarios, you need different tools. You use scenario planning but focus on the range. And robustness testing, does our strategy still work reasonably well if the outcome is at the low end or the high end of that range?
Got it. Checking the resilience of the strategy across the possibilities. And finally, level 4.
Level 4, true ambiguity. This is the deep end. Multiple dimensions of uncertainty are all swirling and interacting at once. It's almost impossible to even define a plausible range of outcomes, let alone assign probabilities.
Pure chaos.
Close to it. Think about a telco in the early 90s trying to figure out the consumer multimedia market. The technology, the demand, the content partnerships, everything was up in the air simultaneously.
Or maybe companies going into Russia right after the Soviet Union collapsed.
Perfect example. Property rights, supply chains, customer behavior, total ambiguity. The good news is level 4 situations usually don't last forever. They tend to resolve into level 3 or 2 as things shake out, or the market simply fails to materialize.
Okay, so you identify the level of uncertainty. What then? How does that shape your actual strategic approach? You mentioned postures.
Right. There are 3 basic strategic postures or intents. First, you have the shapers.
They want to dictate the future.
Exactly. They're not just reacting. They aim to drive the industry towards a structure that benefits them. They often like level 3 or 4 uncertainty because they see an opportunity to resolve it in their favor. Kodak investing $500 million a year in digital photography back when it was still nascent, that was a shaping move.
A huge bet to change the game. Second, posture.
Adapters. They take the industry structure more or less as given. Their game is about reacting quickly and effectively to opportunities as they emerge. Think agility, speed, maybe lower costs.
Like service resellers in telecoms, they don't invent the network, they just find clever ways to use it.
Good example.
Yeah.
They adapt to the landscape created by others. And the third posture, really important under uncertainty,
Yes.
reserving the right to play. This is key for levels 2, 3, and especially 4. You don't make a massive commitment yet. Instead, you make smaller incremental investments.
Why? What do those smaller investments achieve?
They buy you position, maybe better information, maybe preferred access to a technology or supplier, maybe key relationships. They keep you in the game, ready to pounce or scale up if and when the uncertainty starts to clear. It's about maintaining options.
Okay. Postures dictate intent, and then you have a portfolio of actions to execute that intent.
Right. 3 main types of actions. First, big bets. These are the large, often irreversible commitments, building the giant factory, making the huge acquisition, high stakes, big potential payoff, big potential loss. Shapers use these a lot.
Second type.
Options. These are designed precisely to capture that upside while limiting the downside. Think pilot projects, limited joint ventures, licensing a technology before committing fully.
So modest initial investments.
Exactly. They buy you the right, but not the obligation, to make a bigger move later. Perfect for adapters or those reserving the right to play.
And the third action type sounds like a must-have.
No regrets moves. These are the actions that make sense and pay off no matter which future scenario unfolds.
Like what?
Investing in better market intelligence, building critical employee skills that are adaptable, making infrastructure improvements that are valuable across multiple possible futures. These moves strengthen your position regardless.
Okay, so putting it together.
Mm.
If you're facing, say, level 3 uncertainty, that range of futures, you might adopt a posture of reserving the right to play.
Makes sense.
And your portfolio of actions would probably lean heavily towards options to explore the possibilities and no regrets moves to build resilience.
And you'd use robustness testing to make sure your overall approach doesn't collapse if the future ends up at either extreme of that plausible range.
It's about aligning the analysis, the posture, and the actions to the specific level of uncertainty you face, not using a one-size-fits-all approach.
That's the essence of strategy under uncertainty. And this thinking flows directly into how we manage operations. The old model was all about efficiency through scale, right? Getting big, driving down costs on the experience curve.
Yeah, build the biggest factory, get the lowest unit cost.
But the game changed. Digital platforms, global supply chains. Suddenly, agility and flexibility started to matter more than just sheer size. Startups could challenge giants.
So flexibility became key. And then came the crises.
Right, and that's when resilience really came to the forefront. During major shocks, like the pandemic, we saw huge divergence in performance. Companies that had built resilience didn't just survive, they often thrived, grabbing market share from less prepared rivals.
Is there data on that? Does resilience actually pay off financially?
Oh, absolutely. Compelling data. Looking back over 25 years, analysis shows that around 30% of total shareholder returns, TSR, were actually generated during crisis periods.
30%, but crises are relatively rare, aren't they?
Exactly. Those crisis periods only accounted for about 11% of the total time studied. So companies generated a disproportionate amount of their long-term value precisely when things were most turbulent.
Wow. So resilience isn't just a cost center, a drag on efficiency. It's actually a source of competitive advantage and profit.
It absolutely has to be viewed that way, which means leaders need to institutionalize it. 4 key steps here. First, the mindset.
Stop seeing it as just insurance.
Yes. Stop seeing things like redundant suppliers or holding more inventory as just inefficient costs. Start seeing crises as competitive opportunities. Your resilience allows you to act when others are paralyzed.
Okay, mindset first. Second,
A holistic approach. Resilience isn't just about your factory or your supply chain in isolation. It's a property of the whole system, meaning it extends beyond your company's walls. You need resilient relationships with your suppliers, your customers, even regulators, and the wider community. That ecosystem provides buffers during shocks.
Right, so not just about your four walls. Third step.
Institutionalized learnings. When a crisis hits, you often see heroes emerge, people working crazy hours, improvising brilliantly. That's great, but it's not sustainable or scalable.
You can't rely on heroics forever.
No, you need structured processes after the crisis. Things like military-style after-action reviews, AARs. Honestly ask, what went right? What went wrong? Why?
And turn those lessons into concrete improvements.
Exactly. Update your crisis playbooks. Maybe create permanent cross-functional teams designed for rapid response. Make the learning stick.
And the fourth step ties back to the measurement problem we discussed earlier.
New measurements. This is critical. Traditional KPIs are almost always biased towards short-term efficiency. They punish the cost of resilience.
So you need metrics that actually value resilience.
Yes. Strategic measures like how quickly did we recover compared to competitors? What share of the market upswing did we capture after the shock? And operational metrics too, assessing the flexibility of your capital, the agility of your teams.
Measuring readiness, not just output.
Precisely. Now, resilience helps you handle known types of crises. But what about radical uncertainty when you have multiple interacting crises hitting simultaneously?
The next level of challenge.
Right. The operational frontier there moves beyond resilience to optionality.
Optionality, explain that.
It's the ability to efficiently build and maintain a portfolio of different operational approaches, different capabilities, different options, and then rapidly shift resources and emphasis between those options as the uncertain future starts to reveal itself.
So instead of picking one path, you keep multiple paths open.
And you learn constantly, adapting which paths you emphasize. It means shifting from the old linear model of think first, then do, to a much more integrated model of thinking while doing.
Thinking while doing. Strategy and operations become a continuous loop of exploration and execution. How do companies actually do that? How do you build this optionality?
4 key methods emerge. First, expand customer interactions and capture insights. Your operations need to be set up to learn from every touch point, not just what did the customer buy, but how did they try to solve their problem? What did they struggle with?
And feed that learning back instantly.
Directly back into the exploration process R&D strategy. You're essentially turning your customer interactions into a real-time learning engine. Datadog is a good example.
The monitoring platform.
Yeah, they have this open source element. They encourage users to contribute code. That stream of user code is pure gold. It tells them exactly what real-world problems their most engaged users are facing, guiding their development in a very organic way. It reduces the risk of building stuff nobody wants.
Clever. Okay, method 2.
Monetize customer search. Recognize that customers aren't just consuming, they're exploring, searching, discovering. Your system should capture value from that natural exploration.
Spotify comes to mind immediately.
The perfect example. They realized their edge wasn't just a huge music library, it was helping people discover music they'd love. Their Discover Weekly playlist is a prime example of monetizing that search process. They predict what you'll like based on your exploration, keeping you hooked. That discovery engine is way harder for competitors to copy than just licensing songs.
Makes sense. Method 3.
Individualize offerings efficiently. Use data and flexible operations to cater to specific needs without massive upfront costs and inventory or fixed designs. Maximize choice, minimize sunk cost.
Like mass customization, but maybe taken further.
Exactly. Think Indochino for custom suits online. They offer a vast range of fabrics and styles, all configured digitally. The actual suit only gets made after you order. Huge selection, minimal inventory risk for them.
Or platform models.
Like Roblox. They provide the tools, the platform, the users create the actual products, the games, the experiences. Roblox gets massive variety and caters to countless niches, but the development risk for any specific game is borne by the user creator, not Roblox itself. That's extreme optionality.
Okay, and the final method, method 4.
Integrate search and execution. Create really tight, fast feedback loops between what's happening in day-to-day operations and your R&D or strategic planning.
Shorten the distance between learning and doing.
Yes. Slack's origin story is a classic here. It started as an internal tool for a game development team. They were solving their own communication problems.
So the users and creators were the same people.
Initially, yes, which meant they could instantly see what worked, what didn't, and iterate incredibly quickly. The product was battle-tested in real-world use from day one.
We're seeing this with AI models now too, aren't we?
Absolutely. The way ChatGPT was launched is a prime example of thinking while doing, releasing it broadly, even for free initially.
Wasn't just about getting users, it was about getting data.
Massive amounts of real-world interaction data to rapidly improve the model. Search and execution were happening simultaneously in public, accelerating the learning curve dramatically.
Okay, this idea of thinking while doing, operating effectively when things are chaotic and uncertain, it needs more than just good intentions. It needs a specific mechanism to manage execution when the original plan inevitably falls apart.
Which it always does under real uncertainty.
And that's where this concept for military planning comes in. Commander's intent, or maybe CEO intent in our context.
It's such a powerful concept. It's the bridge that allows strategy to survive contact with reality. CEO intent defines the successful end state. Not the plan to get there, but what does success actually look like when the dust settles?
And it explicitly acknowledges that the detailed plan you started with, it's probably going to break.
It assumes the plan will fail because of friction, chaos, unexpected enemy moves, incomplete information. The plan is just a starting point. The intent is what matters.
So the real power here is empowerment, isn't it?
Absolutely. Intent gives subordinates employees the understanding they need to use their own initiative, to improvise, to adapt the failing plan.
While still ensuring they achieve the original strategic objective, they know the ultimate goal.
The classic historical illustration is the D-Day airborne landings in 1944. The plan was incredibly detailed, exactly where units should land, where they should assemble, which bridges to take by when.
And what happened?
Total chaos on the drop zones. Paratroopers scattered everywhere, units mixed up, leaders miles from their men, radios lost. By any measure, the plan was an instant failure.
But the mission ultimately succeeded. Why?
Because every soldier, every junior leader understood the commander's intent, seized the key bridges and causeways behind the beaches, blocked German reinforcements. They didn't need the precise plan. They knew the why.
So they formed ad hoc groups, used their initiative, and fought like hell to achieve those objectives, even though they weren't where the plan said they should be.
Exactly. Intent rescued the operation from the failure of the plan.
And we can see parallels in business, especially in complex, fast-moving operations like logistics. Think about FedEx, founded by a former Marine, Fred Smith. Chaos is just another Tuesday for them.
Right. Imagine a sudden blizzard shuts down the highways between Denver and Kansas City. The detailed plan for every truck and plane that night, instantly useless.
But the CEO intent is crystal clear.
Get every package to its destination safely, undamaged, on time. That's the end state.
So the local managers, the dispatchers, they don't just freeze or wait for orders from Memphis.
No way. They understand the intent. They improvise, reroute trucks hundreds of miles, try to get space on planes, call in extra drivers, move trailers differently, whatever it takes to adapt the means to achieve the fixed objective.
That's empowerment, driven by clear intent. So how does a company build this capability? You can't just declare, use your initiative. How do you train people to improvise effectively?
It takes deliberate effort. 3 key training approaches stand out. First, simulation training, combined with those after-action reviews, AARs we mentioned.
Put people in realistic, messy situations.
Yes. Simulate a product launch where a competitor reacts unexpectedly or a supply chain disruption. Force them to adapt the plan to still meet the original objectives, and then critically conduct a blunt AAR. What worked? What didn't? Why did that improvisation succeed or fail?
Learning from practice.
Second.
Small projects.
Okay.
Let teams practice improvisation where the stakes are lower. Empower them to tackle small, uncertain market entries or launch experimental initiatives.
So they build confidence and skill without risking the whole company.
Exactly. It's a safe sandbox for developing that improvisational muscle.
Yeah.
And third,
History study. Sounds academic, but it's powerful. Studying business cases, even military history, gives people perspective. It shows them countless examples where the initial plan failed, but initiative guided by clear intent saved the day. It normalizes adaptation.
right, we've covered structuring the organization for risk, shaping strategy under uncertainty, enabling execution with CEO intent. But there's still a massive potential roadblock. All this great thinking can be shot down by the finance department if the tools they use are biased against these kinds of ventures.
Yes, the final barrier. We have to talk about the pitfalls in how we evaluate risky long-term projects, especially things like R&D, using standard discounted cash flow, DCF.
Now, the techniques themselves, DCF, IRR, they're mathematically sound, aren't they? Time value of money is real.
Absolutely, the concepts are fine. The problem isn't the formula. It's how it gets applied. Too often, analysts treat DCF like a black box, put numbers in, get an answer, trust the answer without critically examining the inputs and assumptions.
And those flawed inputs can systematically kill off promising but distant and uncertain projects.
Exactly. They create an unwarranted aversion to the very kind of long-term, high-risk investments that often drive strategic breakthroughs.
Okay, let's break down the common mistakes. Pitfall number 1 you flagged is improper treatment of inflation.
This one is subtle but incredibly damaging, especially for projects with payoffs many years out. The common mistake is to estimate future cash flows in real terms, today's dollars, essentially stripping out expected inflation.
Okay, that seems conservative. What's the problem?
The problem is they then discount those real cash flows using a nominal discount rate or hurdle rate. And nominal rates inherently include an inflation premium.
So you're mixing apples and oranges. You've taken inflation out of the cash flows but left it in the discount rate.
Precisely. And because discounting compounds over time, this mismatch severely understates the present value of those distant cash flows. The longer the project, the worse the distortion.
So an R&D project with a genuinely good long-term real return might look terrible when discounted this way.
Exactly. The source material gives a clear comparison. A project with a 10% expected real return should look attractive compared to, say, the historical real return of the S&P 500, which is around 8.5%. But because of this inflation mismatch in the DCF, it gets rejected against a high nominal hurdle rate.
Flawed analysis kills a good project. Okay, pitfall number 2, excessive risk adjustments. This sounds like using too high a discount rate.
It's specifically about using a single high discount rate for the entire life of a multi-phase project where risk changes over time. Think drug development or any major R&D.
Why is that wrong? Risk is high.
The risk is high at the beginning, but a constant high discount rate mathematically implies that the risk grows exponentially geometrically year after year. It assumes risk follows a random walk and gets worse further out.
But for R&D, that's often not true, is it? If you get past phase 1 trials, the risk of failure in phase 3 might actually decrease significantly.
Exactly. The uncertainty resolves or diminishes as you pass key milestones. Applying the initial high-risk premium to cash flows 20 years out after many hurdles have been cleared makes no sense.
Let's use that R&D example from the source material again. The initial flawed analysis using one high discount rate showed an expected IRR of just 10%. Unattractive.
Right. Dead on arrival against a typical 20% hurdle rate for R&D. But if you segment the risk, say you assume that phase 3, the lower risk commercialization phase, could be valued and theoretically sold at the end of phase 2 for its expected value, $136 million in the example.
What happens to the overall project IRR then?
It jumps from 10% to 28%. Suddenly it looks much more appealing.
And if you could value and sell the whole successful project after clearing just phase 1 for $79 million,
then the expected return for that initial phase 1 investment skyrockets to over 63%. The single discount rate was brutally penalizing future success based on early stage risk.
so the solution is
Segment the project. Value the phases sequentially, adjusting the risk assessment for each phase. And ideally, use a more sophisticated method like certainty equivalent value, CEV.
Okay, CEV. Break that down simply. How does it avoid this trap?
CEV cleanly separates the adjustment for risk from the adjustment for time. Instead of using one high discount rate that mashes both together, you do 2 steps. First, you take the uncertain, risky future cash flow and figure out its certainty equivalent. What guaranteed amount today would make you indifferent to getting that uncertain amount in the future?
So you quantify the risk adjustment separately.
Yes. Then you take that certain equivalent value and discount it back to the present using only the risk-free rate, like the rate on government bonds. You're not compounding the risk penalty over time.
Much more precise. It isolates time value from risk value.
Exactly. Which leads right into the third big pitfall, failure to acknowledge management flexibility. This ignores 2 huge factors: diversification and options.
Diversification. How does that apply here?
Well, a specific R&D project might look terrifyingly risky to the manager responsible for it. Failure could be career-ending for them. But for a well-diversified shareholder of the company...
That specific project's risk is just a tiny part of their overall portfolio.
Right. Basic CPM theory tells us that much of the unique risk associated with specific research projects, is it technically feasible, will customers adopt it, is highly diversifiable. Shareholders are diversified, The company itself holds a portfolio of projects. The analysis needs to reflect that portfolio view, not just the isolated project risk.
And the second part of flexibility, the options aspect.
This is about real options. Standard DCF assumes a fixed path you invest, cash flows happen or don't, but management isn't passive. They have choices along the way.
They can react to how things unfold.
Yes. If the project is a massive success, they have the option to expand production, invest more, scale up. If it's failing badly, they have the hugely valuable option to abandon it, cut their losses, and redirect resources.
That abandonment option is like free insurance, isn't it?
It's incredibly valuable. It truncates the downside risk, but standard DCF ignores it. The source example showed that simply acknowledging the option to abandon the R&D project after year one if it looked bad.
Boosted the expected IRR again.
Dramatically, from that 63% we got by segmenting risk up to 83%. Ignoring management's flexibility to adapt to expand success and kill failure systematically undervalues projects with high uncertainty because it ignores the inherent optionality.
Well, this has certainly felt like a Pocket MBA session, a really practical toolkit for navigating risk and uncertainty.
The goal was really to lay out how modern organizations need to move beyond just playing defense, beyond simple compliance.
And embrace calculated risk-taking as the engine of growth. It requires structuring the organization differently, thinking about ERM, about CEO intent,
Shaping strategy using frameworks like the 4 levels, building in operational optionality.
and crucially, fixing those financial models that can inadvertently kill your best long-term bets.
It all comes back to that idea of daring, doesn't it? The Italian root of risk, riciciare.
To dare. Managers need to dare to challenge the old ways, the systems that might be holding them back from capturing real growth.
Daring to look at risk not just as a threat, but as an opportunity to be managed intelligently.
So perhaps the final thought we leave you with today is this. Take a hard look at your own organization. If your culture and systems heavily favor short-term efficiency, if your financial evaluations tend to penalize those distant, uncertain, but potentially huge payoffs,
Then ask yourself, what specific high-potential project, what potential big bet or valuable option are you perhaps rejecting right now, simply because the old ways of thinking and measuring make it too hard to say yes? What are you not daring to do?
a challenging question to ponder. Thank you for joining us for this session of the Pocket MBA.
We hope this toolkit helps you navigate your next strategic challenge.